The following program is brought to you by Cloudcast Media, a podcast leader in developing shows to elevate local brands, local stories, and local storytellers. Cloudcast, bringing ears and minds home.
The San Diego Union Tribune and Retirement Strategies Group present the Union Tribune Community Spotlight Show with your host, Drew Schlossberg.
I'm Drew Schlossberg of the San Diego Union Tribune, and I am pleased to have back on the air with us is Dr. Al Spada. Is it Spada or Spada?
It's Spada, but
Spada. No,
either is fine.
No, we're going to get the right one over here. He's a professor and vice chair of the Department of Neurology at Duke University, a PhD and an MD, School of Medicine out there. And Al, it's always good to see you and chat about all the cool things that you are doing in the world of neurology and so forth. So talk about how you got into this field.
Yeah, well, so I was always interested in science, even when I was in high school. And I attended the University of Pennsylvania and majored in biology.
Go Quakers.
And yes, indeed. And at that time, I was exposed to genetics, and I found genetics really exciting. And so I decided I would, pursue a program where I would be able to get an MD and a PhD simultaneously.
Well, that's something.
And as a PhD student, I wanted to work on inherited diseases, and among the options was the possibility to work with a gentleman, Dr. Kurt Fischbeck, who actually now is at the NIH, and he's a neurologist, and so I decided I would work with him and study an inherited neuromuscular disease, spinal and bulbar muscular atrophy, also known as Kennedy's disease. And that's where I got exposed to neurodegeneration. And I had a great experience working with Dr. Fischbeck. In fact, we made a seminal discovery together that was published back in 1991 in the journal Nature. And then I never looked back.
I think that's terrific. And, of course, understatement of the world here, much has been written about and discussed about Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and so forth. And I think when we were chatting, and of course sort of ties into ALS, better known as Lou Gehrig's disease, as we age, okay, and we are living longer, okay, there's a connectivity between more Alzheimer's cases just due to the fact we're living into our 80s and 90s, correct?
Absolutely. We have it's called the gray tsunami. How we have so many people now who are over 50 years of age, and by the middle part of the century, we'll have more senior citizens than any other age demographic in this country, and actually for Western Europe, it'll be the similar situation. And, in healthcare, we've made enormous strides in treating cardiovascular disease.
Right.
You probably know people who benefited from having bypass surgeries or, other sorts of procedures. And in cancer, we're making incredible progress also, though there's still a lot left to do. But a number of cancers now are quite treatable. And so what's left for people who survive those disorders, unfortunately, is this specter of getting a neurodegenerative disorder, such as Parkinson's disease or Alzheimer's disease, where, if you live to be 80, you have like a 12 to 15% chance of getting one of these two disorders, it appears.
And that is a huge number. And I think what I appreciate you had said in the past on our show, Al, and you'll continue to say in today's show, is that this is a tsunami that is coming. It's not like it may be here. No, if we don't do something about it, it'll be catastrophic. And that's not trying to be chicken little, but it's true, is it not?
Yeah, I think, again, I haven't studied the economic impacts directly, but I've read the work that other individuals have done, and the socioeconomic costs to our society are estimated to be staggering, because individuals who suffer from these disorders need considerable care and attention. We're not really set up to have the society fund that. If you go into assisted living, that's something you have to pay for out of pocket. Patients are able to be partially functional for years before they would qualify for going into skilled nursing care. And that's a burden that families will have to bear. Either they will care for their loved ones, which will interfere with their abilities to maintain, productivity in their careers, or they'll have to come up with a way to pay for that care for their loved ones. So, these are serious issues, admittedly, but even just beyond the pure economic impact, which I said could be staggering, the emotional impact and seeing your loved ones decline, before your eyes, no longer able to feed themselves or care for themselves, or no longer able to recognize their grandchildren and then their children. This is obviously a very upsetting experience. I personally lived through it with my own mother suffering from Alzheimer's disease, and I'm sure, everyone has had some experience of that, either within their network of friends or family members. Well,
it is so real. And we were just talking about in a previous show today, Al, about childhood obesity, which is also at epidemic levels.
Yes.
And if we don't get our hands around that, this is just going to morph into just an unbelievable crush in our health system with diabetes. And everything goes with it. And this, again, not to be Chicken Little here, but this is real. I mean, you're dealing with things. If we don't do something about this, and especially with the Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, there's going to be some very, very, very difficult times ahead of us as a world, for one, as a country, specifically in this area. So you're working very closely on the treatment aspect of it, correct? Talk about that.
Yeah, we're doing research that's focused on trying to come up with ways to treat these disorders. There's much effort on this now by many researchers throughout this country and actually around the world. In fact, I was just at an Alzheimer's disease meeting these last few days at the Salk Institute, and it's exciting to see the pace of progress. Our understanding of this disease is so far beyond, what we knew just a decade ago.
Right.
And so, my own research is focused on trying to come up with ways to improve the body's ability to, fight off declines that naturally occur as we age.
Right. And with that, I think obviously people are aware of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and the degree what these are growing and how that's going to have an impact on the family. And to your point, you experienced it with your mom. As you know, my 95-year young mom just passed away recently, but didn't fall into that area. And you have had a little bit of dementia and all that business, but not too much. So I just can't imagine, with this. And again, the work you're doing at Duke and here and in San Diego. Talk about that.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do is to come up with small molecules that will interact with what would be called key sort of master regulators.
Right.
And, so what we're interested in is helping the nervous system, nerve cells, and other cells in the nervous system to be able to deal with this stress of misfolded proteins. You see in neurodegenerative disorders, including Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, what occurs is that we have proteins or parts of proteins, peptides, that misfold, and they're no longer able to be degraded like they should be. And then they build up and they form what are called aggregates, and that leads to a pathogenic cascade. So it turns out that we have pathways in place in our nerve cells and other cells in the central nervous system to deal with this stress. But as we age, those pathways decline in function. So our work is focused on coming up with pharmacological therapies to boost these pathways and, if you will, rejuvenate them. Now, there are some things you can naturally do, actually, to help to rejuvenate these pathways. exercise is something that's helpful. And of course, getting a really good night's sleep is important, and diet is always a part of the equation here as well. But what we're trying to do is to come up with a therapy that will, accentuate that type of effect.
Yeah, and one of the things, and we've got about a minute or so before we go to break, but now there's some research out there that you can get tested and find out what this may look like 10 and 20 years from now, right? Yeah,
we have an ability to do this now. We have what's called a PET scan, and you look, to see if you have amyloid in your brain, and this can be detected 15, 20 years before you will get Alzheimer's disease. PET scans are very expensive, however, and, not something that we could do routinely. So efforts have been done by our field to come up with a blood test. And that work has progressed quite rapidly over the last 2 years. And I think it's very conceivable that we'll have an approved blood test within the next 2 years, probably, maybe sooner, where you could go to your doctor and find out if you're at risk of getting Alzheimer's disease, in 5, 10, or 15 years.
No, that'll be game-changing. I want to continue that conversation when we come back from break, Al, and then talk a little bit about we always leave the second segment of our shows for how we can support your efforts on this. When we return with Dr. Al Spada, he's a professor and vice chair of Department of Neurology at Duke University School of Medicine. I'm Drew Schlossberg of the San Diego Union Tribune. You're listening to another edition of the Community Spotlight Show here on Cloudcast Media Radio. Brought to you by Retirement Strategies Group. Retirement is set.
Cloudcast 180. Powerful people, powerful stories, 180 seconds.
Welcome to Cloudcast 180. We're here today with the president and CEO of Father Joe's Villages. Welcome to Deacon Jim Vargas.
Thank you, Charles. Good to be with you.
We have 3 minutes. Let's hit it fast and furiously. We're going to talk this morning with you about San Diego being a very expensive city, which creates a housing crisis, which is exacerbating the homeless crisis in San Diego. Let's talk about your leadership on this issue.
Sure, absolutely. We do have an affordable housing crisis here in San Diego. In fact, if you ask about the number one issue why people fall into homelessness, it's lack of affordability. And so they fall onto the streets, especially when rents go up, and rents are very expensive here. So we at Father Joe's Villages focus tremendously on housing. In fact, about 40% of our intervention is placing individuals into permanent and affordable housing. All right, so shows you the extent of what we do. And of course, there's services that go along with this, because in order for people to retain their housing, their dwellings, they have to have the services that they're necessary, whether it's mental health services or substance use disorder services, whatever that is. We have a Turning the Key initiative, whereby we will be introducing 2,000 affordable housing units into the community during the next number of years. In fact, we just closed on a deal to purchase and refurbish a motel in the South Bay area. It's going to add 83 permanent supportive housing units. Next week, we'll be closing financially on a groundbreaking that will have 14-story building, 407 units of housing as well, taking about 550 people off the street. So housing is extremely important.
Which means you're investing a lot of capital. How are you finding that capital to solve the housing crisis in San Diego for homeless folks? 90 to 95%
of our funding is public funding. Various sources, whether it be from the state, it be local, county, city, municipality. So most of it is public funding. There's tax credits that are involved there. The capital stack is quite large, actually.
So you're finding the land, you're finding the capital, you're changing lives. How are you minimizing the risk of future homelessness for these clients of yours? We're minimizing it through our services.
We need to make sure that in order for them to retain the housing, that they receive the services that they need, that are holistic and are comprehensive to their specific needs.
That's fantastic. Deacon Jim, in the last 10 years, your organization has taken 11,000 folks from homelessness to a home.
So I congratulate you. Any closing thoughts for our audience?
No, that's what it's all about. And I mentioned public funding, but at the end of the day, the bulk of our